listening to the Terrific Teacherpreneur, a podcast for teachers looking to grow a successful online business. Your host, Alex, was able to transform her Teachers Pay Teachers store from a small side hustle into a profitable full-time business. She now helps other teachers do the same. Listen along for actionable tips and helpful wisdom about business and marketing as a teacherpreneur. Here's your host, Alex.
Hello and welcome to the Terrific Teacherpreneur podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and in this episode, I want to talk about how you should be spending your time if you are really limited on time. And so let's just imagine, for an example, you've got a week where you're really swamped because you're a full-time busy teacher, like you've got a lot of work going on in terms of teaching, or you know that things are really busy and hectic. It's like the holiday season, or things are going on with your family. You've got like kids to take care of, sick relatives, dog needs to go to the vet. Like it's just one of those weeks where it's just mayhem. Maybe you've been sick, whatever. And you know that instead of having a large amount of time to work on TPT like you normally do, this week you only have an hour, or maybe even 30 minutes. Or maybe you actually do TPT like full time or something, and you would normally get to spend the whole day on TPT, but because of other, life circumstances, you find yourself only able to dedicate 1 hour that day or 30 minutes. Let's talk about 1 hour or 30-minute pockets of time where hey, I've only got this really short period. It's just less than what I normally get. It's like this small period of time or this small amount of time in general this week. And you sit at your computer and you're like, okay, well, what should I be working on? Now that I know I don't have this sort of endless amount of time, what's a priority? What's important to me? What's going to make me the most money? I think it's that question we all have. You want to spend your time wisely, because in your normal day-to-day way of doing things, you tend to feel like you've got a lot more options. You might be full-time TPT and you can just do everything. Maybe you just get 3, 4, 5 hours a week because you're doing this as a part-time thing, but there's still plenty of opportunities to kind of touch on lots of different areas and kind of get lots of things done. And in this situation where you just really feel like, whoa, all I have is an hour, that's not enough. I can't write a blog post, do all my social media planning, finish creating that product, update all my previews. I can't physically do it all in an hour this week. So I guess I've got to pick one thing. I've got to spend my time kind of wisely. Well, what do I choose? Okay, so if that's how you're feeling, and it definitely happens, or maybe in general, that's all you ever get is 1 hour in a week or something like that. How do you spend that time? And I do have a few thoughts. You're welcome to disagree with me. I'm not saying what I say is gospel or anything like that, but I'm pretty vocal on how I feel about spending time wisely on the profitable stuff. So I feel like I'm going to be kind of opinionated on this one. And there's a few things I think are really worth spending time on. And there's a lot of things that are not worth it. Let's start with what's not worth it. And it's marketing. Don't get me wrong, I love Pinterest, love sending emails to my email list. I'm not saying I haven't made lots of money from those things, blogging, whatever, all that's great. But when we're looking at guaranteed revenue of large amounts of money, consistent money, when it really comes down to making money, marketing is always just the icing on the cake. It's always just going to be bonus money. And it doesn't matter how big a seller you are, that stuff is always going to be extra. And for those of you listening, because I know there's always someone that will disagree with me, that'll be like, no, I disagree. My email list is where I make all my money. It's so, so important. I send out an email, I get loads of sales. I'm sure there are many of you that have really established marketing platforms, big Facebook groups, substantial followers on Instagram. Maybe you have a really successful podcast or blog or YouTube channel or whatever. Maybe you send an email to your email list, or you make an Instagram reel and you're guaranteed to make money. And so you're probably thinking, Alex is wrong. Now, although there are some exceptions to the rule, there are probably a really, really small handful of sellers that can say that they have half an hour and they spend it on Instagram making a reel that's going to bring them a lot of ka-chings. And if that's you, that's great. There are some exceptions to the rule. But for the most part, a lot of marketing for most sellers just isn't, profitable to the extreme. For most sellers, it's a bit of a gamble. If you do spend that time posting something on social media, even if you're making a pin or writing an email, can you actually guarantee that once you hit send or press publish or post that you're going to be getting a large amount of money? Most sellers can't actually guarantee that. Marketing is such a finicky, funny thing. And it's also especially one of those things that can be kind of short term. You could send an email and you could actually be someone that makes money when you send emails, but once the 24-hour sort of period has gone past and where you've brought in some sales, after that, there's nothing. Like the email doesn't serve you anymore. That email has been sent out. You've got all the buyers you're ever going to get from it. And then that's it. It's not going to continually bring you revenue. And that can also happen on social media. You could post a great reel if you're someone with an established account and everyone's DMing you and you're getting all these like links sent out through ManyChat and you get like a little influx in sales when you talk about that resource. And that's great. If that's you, that's great. But once that post dies down within 24, 48 hours, like that's no longer serving you. It's probably not going to be bringing you large amounts of revenue a week, a month, a year from now, obviously. So a lot of marketing just isn't long term. And even for people like me that do Pinterest, where it is more long term, it's a real Russian roulette on Pinterest too. You can make a pin that is a flop. You can make a pin that goes viral a year from now, but you just don't know. Marketing, in my opinion, has like a kind of a risky nature to it in terms of whether it's going to bring you money. And so I just don't feel that for me is a really great use of your time if you are limited on time, because it's quite unlikely to bring you income, or it's quite unlikely to bring you long-term income. And I kind of hope that kind of covers all bases there, but it's probably kind of hard to argue with that. You're either a seller where you're going to post or publish something and it's probably just not going to bring you any money, or even if you're one of those established people where it will bring you money. Will it bring you money in the long term? Probably not. So it's something, again, to keep in mind if you want to be doing something today with that short period of time that's going to consistently bring you lots of money. And we're talking, those are the two factors here. Consistently and lots. So we want to be bringing in money in a long-term sense. I personally don't think marketing is the way to spend that hour or 30 minutes. That's just me, and you're welcome to disagree with me. You happen to have a really established marketing platform. I'm sure there are some of you where that's true. But for most sellers, and I really think all sellers, some of these other tasks are a lot more guaranteed to bring you that income. Now I've kind of ranted about what not to do. I want to talk about what you could spend that time on. And I will throw the other thing in there. Marketing is one thing that can easily end up taking up a lot of time and not necessarily be profitable. Even if you promise to not pick up your phone and go on Instagram, there are other ways we can end up sort of draining time and energy. You could easily blow half an hour, like kind of answering emails in your inbox or something, or like doing admin tasks or something. So let's just say I'm not talking about that stuff either. That's not always a great use of your time. I'm going to list a couple of things I think are a great use of your time if you're limited on time. You've got some 30-minute time slot or an hour. Some of these tasks are going to fit into that time period well, and you can easily get it done in that time, but also are probably going to have a really long-lasting impact in bringing you money a week, a month, a year, 10 years from now, whatever. First one, SEO, search engine optimization. So if you've got 30 minutes or an hour, whatever that time period is, sitting down and optimizing the SEO on even just one resource in that time, great use of your time. If you're actually really quick and you're able to do more than one resource, even better. Like if an hour is plenty of time for you SEO-wise and you could actually do 2 resources or 3 or whatever in that time, great. I've sometimes batched things for product lines and I'm actually able to do a bunch of resources in one go. So you might be able to get 5 resources optimized in an hour. I don't know what your speed is of SEO optimizing, but honestly, if you want to do a really good job of it, you tend to end up probably wanting to just spend like time on 1 or 2 resources. So that would look like, hopping on TPT search and doing some keyword research, seeing where your resource is ranking. Obviously this is like looking at products that have low views and then going, okay, let's try a new search term. You do some research, you try a new term, you put something else in, maybe you kind of check to see whether it's improved its ranking. Sometimes it does show up straight away. So sometimes you have to wait, but this is where one of those things where you might do a bit of a half kind of job. You might spend that 30 minutes just changing some titles. And then, the next time you get a chance to do SEO, you go and check on them all to see where they're ranking. But a lot of the time you can actually see the change pretty quickly. But yeah, and then like making some changes to titles and snippets. And I don't think I really need to dive into why this is great, but like, let's be honest, we all know that you can't make sales on a resource that no one is viewing or seeing. So fixing a view problem on a resource, getting it ranking higher on TPT and fixing its SEO, guaranteed to improve your sales pretty much. See, SEO is not guaranteed to prove your sales if you don't know what you're doing and you don't make a good change, but assuming that you pick a great new keyword or whatever and you rank higher, that SEO work that you did in that half an hour is probably going to bring you more views. And when we get more views, we're a lot more likely to get more sales. And so this is a great opportunity to make money. So SEO is my number one. I'm not listing these in like a particular order, but this is definitely the number one thing. And that's because for me, I think that in terms of like TPT being like a funnel, views are the biggest, like most important thing you want to be aiming for first. And I say this is because there's absolutely no point you making this gorgeous, amazing, persuasive preview on a resource that has like 50 views and no one's ever going to see. So it's like there's no point making the preview basically. And I would liken it to if you're trying to sell your car and it's like really badly in need of painting, it's got like scratches all over it and stuff, and you're inside like putting new floor mats down in the footwells. And it's like, well, the buyers don't care about that. They're not even going to get in, look at the car to see that because all they can see is this horrible paint job. And so your job should be probably focusing on the outside first, getting it all painted, looking good. So yeah, I think that that's the same with TPT. You know, you want that, the views first. Once that's ticked off, then you can go into the details of like the inside of the listing and get things looking good. But yeah, SEO. I know it's boring. I know it's hard. And I know it's like one of those things where you kind of go, I'm not good at this. I don't know what I'm doing. But even if you don't really know what you're doing and you kind of fumble around long enough with SEO and you put enough time and energy effort into it, eventually usually pans out. And I think it's because there's actually not a lot of skill to it. I don't think anyone is born better at SEO than someone else. I think it's one of those things where you just literally have to put in the hours of work, and you sit there and do enough keyword research and you try enough terms and you make enough changes and you just keep going, keep trying. Eventually you land on something that sticks. It's kind of a time commitment thing really. But anyway, SEO, that is my main recommendation for if you've got a really short time pocket that's going to have a really good impact on your sales. Now, these next ones I won't dive into quite as much detail with, but I've put covers as the next one, just because of like, if you've got some old covers in your store and you're updating, that's tied to views. So assuming that you're ranking okay, if you've got a great cover, that's going to help you get more views. If you've got a cover that you made in 2016, it's like rectangular with like chevron on it or whatever, like that's going to hinder your sales. So getting all your covers in your store up to date is always a great use of time. Or if you're a smaller or newer seller and you just realize that some of the covers you made when you first started were super ugly, a really great use of your time. You could just sit there and make a couple of covers. I think that's going to help your views. It's going to help your sales. So covers. Next one is thumbnails. This one's a tricky one. I'm a product photography gal, so saying thumbnails means I actually need to like prep and photograph a resource and then often do all this editing and uploading, and yeah, it's not something I could probably do in 30 minutes for a lot of the time. But there are some thumbnails where you're using screenshots or mock-ups, or where you're just like editing a photo because you've like kind of mastered photography a bit better, or maybe you're just trying out a new photo, switching out your photos or something. So if it's a thumbnail change that doesn't require like photographing a whole new set of photos, whatever, then you could do a thumbnail change for a resource for 1, 2, or 3 thumbnails very easily in like 30 minutes. Or if you've got an hour, you could do a couple of thumbnails for a couple of resources. But really great way to get people getting more interested in your resource when they first land on it. Great thumbnails are going to get people more enticed to go to your preview. So it's a good thing to work on. Next up, I mentioned it already, but product photography. It's tricky if you only have 30 minutes, but if you have an hour or so, it's a great use of time to just like whip out your props and print a couple of worksheets out. You don't have to have the entire thing like photographed, edited, uploaded, and like all done. This is one of those tasks that might not be like finished in that hour, but knowing that you've like printed off these worksheets and colored them in and started taking some photos, even if you haven't edited them and uploaded them to TPT or anything like that, and just getting like 90% of it done, that's a great use of your time. I think product photography is really, really powerful for getting more sales. So if you have 30 minutes to an hour and you know there's something that really needs photographing, I think that's a good use of your time. Remembering that photos that you take in that 30 minutes or an hour, you might just use them on thumbnails, but you probably could end up using them in your blog down the line, or end up on social media, like they end up in your preview. Like there's a lot of places they can end up. So it's a very versatile activity in terms of where you end up using the product of what your time was spent on. It's like, hey, I took this one photo. I'm going to end up putting that thing on Pinterest. It's going to end up in my blog. It's going to end up on social media. It's going to end up as my thumbnail and my preview. So it's pretty versatile. I always think product photography is a good use of time. The next one is PDF previews. If I have a quick block of time that's, not too long, 30 minutes, even 40 minutes, I can usually make a preview pretty easily in that period of time. Sometimes it takes only 15, 20 minutes, but it depends on how long, if you've got a template you're working from, if you're starting from scratch, if you're just updating a preview that needs some tweaks, or if you're making a one from scratch. If you're making one for a $3 resource versus like a $50 bundle, that's going to really vary how long it takes. But whether you're making, one preview in that time, or some of the preview, or 2 previews, whatever, it doesn't matter. Spending 30 minutes or an hour on PDF previews is a really good use of your time because it really improves your conversions. Kind of simple truth to it there. So you could go through your store and just make sure that every resource has a preview. You've got an hour to spare. Like, okay, I'm going to make that preview for that bundle I have never gotten around to making a preview for. Not, in my opinion, as important as some of the other things I've mentioned. I mean, like I said earlier, there's absolutely no point making this beautiful preview on a resource that's not getting seen. So, SEO and stuff's a lot more important. But assuming that you are just like not in the mood for SEO right now, fair enough. And you're like, oh, I don't have good lighting today. It's raining. I can't take any photos, and my covers are all really good. There'll be times like that where you're like, well, makes sense for me to make a preview. You might have a resource that is SEO optimized. It's got a great cover. None of that needs fixing. So you're like, well, all that's left to do is the preview. So that would be an opportunity for you to do a PDF preview. And then the next one is price tweets. This is a great one when you have a short period of time. Even if it's just like 20, 30 minutes. You're like, this is all I've got to work on TPT. What can I do in such a short time period? Something that's going to bring me money. If you go to your product statistics and look at your conversions, you can order them from like lowest to highest conversion, highest to lowest, that kind of thing. If you order it from highest to lowest, you can at a glance see what crazy high conversions you have. Whoa, this resource has a 30% conversion or 20% conversion. For the most part, regardless of price point, high conversions at like 20, 30% is usually quite high. And you go, I'll just check that resource does in fact have enough views. Yep, it's got like at least 400 or 500 views. So we know it's an accurate conversion. Wow, that's a high conversion. Maybe we could do a price increase. And so there's probably a couple of resources in your store where you could check the data, be absolutely sure you're on the right track with it. But yeah, pop that price up by like 25, 50 cents or $1 or something. Nothing crazy, like 5, 10% maybe. But that's such an easy sort of task to do. And yeah, it's a moneymaker. If it's your bestseller and you've been selling it for $3.40, and you look at the conversion and you're like, whoa, this is really, really high, and you bump it up to $3.75 or something like that. I don't know. It doesn't seem like a lot of money, it's like it's not that many. It's not even $1, but if it's your bestseller and you're selling it multiple times a day, just for years and years on end, like that's going to add up. That's extra money. That starts off like these price tweaks start off as just being only 50 cents or whatever, but over time that becomes a lot of dollars extra that you're now making. So yeah, price tweaks are a great one. Now that comes to the end of my what should you spend time on. So I talked about how I don't think marketing is the way to go, but I basically kind of listed a lot of things that are product optimization to do with your store. But notice I didn't mention descriptions. I actually just don't think that's just my opinion. I don't think they're the biggest, game changer on your listing. A good snippet with SEO is important, but like if you have a really great description or a really bad description, I don't know if that's going to make the biggest impact on sales. It's definitely worth doing. I mean, you could throw that in there as an option. I don't think it's a terrible idea, but I think most people don't even bother reading descriptions. If your SEO is terrible or your cover or thumbnails are terrible, like it's just that descriptions doesn't even matter at that point because people are not even going to read the description because you've lost them before they've even got to that point. So I haven't mentioned that. And I didn't mention video previews because I don't think they impact conversions very much at all. So a couple of things I didn't mention, but I mostly, if you probably noticed, just mentioned optimizing listings. In general, even if you're, whichever thing you pick, SEO, covers, thumbnails, previews, whatever, if your goal in that 30 minutes to an hour is to just optimize on TPT, like optimize a listing or a couple of listings or something, that's a good use of time for when you're limited on time, and it's going to make a difference to your revenue. So really, really worthwhile. I will add one more thing in. Maybe, if you have an hour to spare, you could work on product creation. I don't think that's like the worst thing ever to work on. The only reason I haven't really put that on the official list is because I talked about how marketing can be kind of risky in nature. Like when you do a bit of marketing, is it ever going to bring you money? Maybe, maybe not. Product creation has a risk because you could be working on a product that's a worse seller, that no matter what you do, no matter how great it is, it's just never going to sell because buyers just don't want it. And you upload it and you don't find out for months or years from now, but it's just not your bestseller. It's just never going to be. So sometimes product creation feels risky. Is it just like, is this going to bring money? It might not. That's the reality. It might not. So I didn't want that to be as one of the main things to spend time on. But I wanted to throw it in there though, because I know there's a lot of newer sellers listening. If you're a newer seller, product creation is a really important thing to spend time on because you're building up your store. So I wanted to have that in there. And I think sometimes as well, it's important even as a seasoned seller to make sure that you are still growing your store, adding things in. And when you hit the jackpot on a best-selling good resource, of course, product creation was a great thing to spend time on because it literally is the thing that brings you money. You're growing your catalog of resources. You're making the thing that you're ultimately going to sell. So I have to throw product creation in there, but it's just not, for me, top of the list because it's not guaranteed to make you money. And I just kind of felt as well like it's a time-consuming thing, and it's unlikely that you could feel accomplished in 30 minutes to an hour with product creation because a lot of the time you're just, I've only got 45 minutes to spare, and all I ended up doing was like this one page of a 50-page resource. You kind of feel like you didn't really get anything completed. Sometimes it's nice when you've got a short time period to do a task to its completion, to SEO optimize a resource, and you kind of tick that box and you feel like you've done something. Product creation is like this ongoing long thing. It could take you many hours or weeks or whatever. So there's nothing wrong with spending time on it. But when you've got a small pocket of time, sometimes I like to go into my store and make a price tweak, or go into my store and SEO optimize a resource in 30 minutes, trying to get into the right headspace for creating a product. And that's just a very involved thing, whether you're starting it from scratch or you're trying to work on one. I'd get frustrated if I was like halfway through making this page and then the timer goes off, like that's it, my work session's over. And I'm like, I was in the middle of writing a sentence. Like, I don't know. It just, for me, I think sometimes product creation is one of those things that's great to do when you've got a lengthier period of time. Because in this example, we're talking about when you have like 1 hour in a week or something, and you're not going to be able to get back to doing TPT stuff for another whole week. So like, if I, start something that I can't finish, I'm in the middle of it, and then I forget where I was up to. So sometimes I feel like, product creation can feel a bit like it's not always great for those small pockets of time. That's just me. You might disagree. And like I said, if you're a newer seller, you might want to be creating products. But the things I've listed for optimizing, I just think are really good for short periods of time. They fit well into the time slot. Mostly they are profitable. Anyway, that's all from me today. I will put a link in the show notes to my template for making previews in case that helps you. But anyway, I hope this has really helped. I hope it's given you something to think about in how to spend your time. And I hope that you have a terrific day.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Terrific Teacherpreneur. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and review on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate that effort. Come back for more actionable tips and helpful wisdom in the next episode with your host, Alex. Until then.